everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today's the day that I've decided to sew my Colette sewing shorts. I thought that I would have a go at doing a sew along tutorial so that you can see the whole process. So here we go. So the first thing that the pattern asks you to do is to stay stitch along the front and back waistbands. So I've got the waistbands here, the front and the back. I've decided to do it in this floral fabric, which I have made a dress in before. So this is just a leftover fabric that I've got that I thought would be quite nice for these shorts. So I've got to stay stitch these waistbands, which means just putting a line of stitching all the way across the top and bottom of the waistbands in order to stop them stretching out really. So stay stitching means that I need to stitch fairly close to the edge and within the seam allowance of 5/8. So there's one edge, as you can see. There we go. So I'll do the rest and get back to you. The next thing that I'm asked to do is to stay stitch along the top edge of all the main pieces for the shorts. So I'll go ahead and do that now. Got to take out all the pins first. And I'm going to stay stitch along the top edge. So there it is, there's the stay stitching along the top edge. I'm going to give it a little press so that it lays flat as well. And I will go and do that on all the pieces. With my pattern pieces, I like to put the actual piece letter on each piece so that I don't forget which is each one. So I like to take my Frixion pen, which is I've mentioned before is a great pen, but you have got to be careful because if you iron over it, it will iron off. And I actually just write the letter that the piece corresponds to. So in this case it's letter C. I don't know if you can see that. I'll mark it on again and then perhaps you can see it now. So I like to mark on there which piece belongs to which, just so that I don't get into a muddle. So when you finish the stay stitching, the next thing you have to do is put the interfacing onto the back of the facing bands E and F. Once you've put the interfacing on, which I've done there, make sure that you snip the notches back in, otherwise you could get into a pickle when you're trying to attach them to your actual shorts pattern. So just a little tip there, make sure you do actually remember to snip those notches back in, otherwise they get lost inside the interfacing when you put that on. Once the interfacing is on, the next step is that you have to put in your darts. There are mine there, okay. And as I say, I like to actually put the lines of the darts on with the Frixion pen, and then very carefully I put my darts together on and put my pin in, making sure that where I put the pin in matches the lines on both sides, and then I know that they are actually lined up. So for those of you who aren't familiar with sewing darts, a good thing to do is to sew from the edge of the fabric here all the way down to the point of the dart. When you get to the point, don't backstitch, just go straight off without securing it, and then you have to actually tie a knot in the thread, and that is a better way of keeping your darts laying flat. I'll just show you how to do that. So I'm going all the way down on the dart, and I like to put a pin where the actual dart finishes so that I know where I've got to come off the fabric. So keep going and just going straight off the fabric, lift the presser foot, take it off, cut it and then just tie a knot. Take your threads and just tie a knot in the end like that, and that secures the dart and it makes it actually lay a lot better. So I've put both my darts in on the shorts back. If you don't like just pinning it, another good tip is to actually use a basting stitch and just baste it in first, and then it will secure it for you and make it a little bit easier. I did used to do that when I was first starting out, but I've got a little bit more secure with actually just putting in pins now and doing it with pins. But I did actually used to base it before I did it, just to make sure that my dart was in the right place. So the pattern now says that I've just got to go and press the darts towards the centre, so I'll just go and do that now. Okay, so next we come to the pockets. Now, I wasn't sure whether I was going to put the pockets in or not, but as I haven't done anything really with pockets before, I thought I'd have a go. So the first thing that the pattern asks you to do is to finish the edge all the way along the edge of the pocket to neaten it up and to stop it from fraying, and that has to be done on the lining and the main pocket. So it says that I have to actually do the finishing along the outer edge of the curve, so I will go and do that, and I use a small zigzag stitch on my sewing machine to do that, as I don't own an overlocker. So I'm just going to set my sewing machine to the zigzag. Okay, and zigzag all the way round, just on the outer curve. So there we go, I've zigzagged all the way round the outer curve. I'm going to give it a little press to make it lay flat, and I'm going to go ahead and do that on all the pocket pieces. So I finished the edges of the pockets, and the next thing you need to do is attach the pockets to the main short pieces. Now on the pockets, where the pattern is, you've got little circles where you have to mark on the pockets a little dot so that you know where to match them up with the pattern pieces, and they're actually on the pattern pieces also. So on your pattern piece you've got to transfer those little dots, those little circles, so you know where to match up the pockets. It's right sides together. You have to put the right side of the pocket onto the right side of the shorts piece, and in this part it is the lining piece to part A of the shorts pattern, and I've decided to do my lining in the same fabric that I'm going to be using for the actual pocket. Obviously you can choose any lining you like, a contrasting lining, a contrasting colour or fabric, but I've decided to do it in the same fabric. And I think a simple way of doing this is on the actual dot, put a little pin through the dot there, and then on the dot on the main pattern piece put the pin through the dot so that you can absolutely match up where the dots go, and then just pin, I'm just going to pin the lining pocket piece to the main shorts piece and pin that all the way down along the outer edge of your shorts piece like that. So there, I've pinned it all the way across, and now what you have to do is stitch the pocket on from there down to there with a normal straight stitch. So I'm just going to do that. Must remember to put my sewing machine back onto straight stitching. I've done that plenty of times before where I've ended up zigzagging. So, and the seam allowance for this is just a 3/8 seam allowance. So again, it's not the whole 5/8, so you're doing it inside the normal seam allowance. Okay, so I've sewn the lining pocket onto section A, and then obviously you can see there it is there. And the next thing I'm asked to do is to finish the edge along where the pocket is with a zigzag, or obviously if you've got an overlocker you can overlock it. So I'll just finish that edge now with a zigzag stitch all the way down from the waist down to the bottom. Okay, so I've zigzagged all the way down the edge, along where the pocket is as well. And I'm going to do that now on all the pieces to attach all the pocket pieces to all the main pieces of the shorts pattern. And I'll be back to you in just a moment. So the pockets are on, and I'm really pleased with how that went. It was really simple to sew the pockets onto the actual main pieces of the garment. And once you've sewn them on, you have to then press the pockets open at the seam, making sure that you press the seam allowance towards the pocket, which I've done. Yeah, so I'm really pleased I put them in, and I think that's going to make a nice additional feature onto the shorts. The next part of the project is to sew together the shorts side seam to the shorts front seam. So first of all, I'm going to pin the pieces together, and you've got to make sure that you pin the two pockets on top of each other, right sides together. So I've placed my pins all the way around the outer edge of the pocket and then down the rest of the seam. And as you can see, we're not pinning all the way down because that's where the opening is for the pockets. So now it's the time to sew those seams together, and we are back now to the 5/8 seam allowance. So there we are, they're sewn on, and you can see now we've got a hole for the pocket. So yeah, I'm pleased with that. When you're sewing the pockets together like that, go around with the sewing machine carefully, taking out the pins as you go. I would go quite slowly, which is what I did, as it was a little bit tricky going around, and especially getting to the part where you needed to come up to further than where the pocket was so that you had enough room for your seam allowance. So I'm going to go and sew the other one now, and I'll be right back. So that was successful. I've managed to sew the pockets onto into the correct position with the hole there. And there you go, and I've got the pocket there coming out of the side of section B. So I'm really pleased with that so far. It was just a little bit tricky to go around the curve and keep it all together, but generally I'm pretty happy. So now what I have to do is sew this side edge down here of section A to the side edge of section C, which is the back part of the shorts pattern. So I'll go ahead and do that now. First of all, though, I need to pin them together. So that's the side edge there, and I need to find my corresponding side edge of the other side of section A, which I've got, and put them right sides together, and then I'm going to pin those together. But obviously, if you're a competent sewer, because it's only a small amount that you're pinning together, you might be able to just go ahead and sew it straight away without pinning, but I like pinning just to make sure that I am accurate when I am sewing. So pinning those two sections together, and then I'm going to go ahead and sew that down that seam. Do make sure that you've got right sides together, as I've made that mistake before where I've ended up putting wrong side to right side or vice versa. So I'm going to go now and stitch those two sides together, and again it's with the 5/8 seam allowance, which is all the way through the pattern. I've sewn those edges together. There you can see is my seam allowance there, and they are now together. You've now got to go and finish your seam allowance, and again you can either put a zigzag edge down there or overlock it. So there's the overlock seam, and when you open it up it looks like that. And I've pressed the seam towards the back. So I'm going to go now and do the other one in exactly the same way. Great, so they're both done now, and the next thing you have to do is sew the two pattern pieces together around the crotch area, making sure that you match up the notches correctly. You've got obviously a single notch there and a double notch on one side, so make sure that your notches are matched up and sew them together, right sides together. The first thing I like to do is line up the seams to make sure that they are exactly lying on top of each other, and then put a pin in there for that. And then once you've got those seams matching up, it's easier then to match around the rest of the crotch. And I then go to the notches, and I've got my two notches there, so I know that that has to match up. And obviously then I go to the notches on the other side of the crotch over here, and I know that I've got everything in the right place because the notches are matching up, the double notch with the double notch and the single notch with the single notch. And now I'm just going to continue to pin all the way around. I will then just sew directly from the pins, but obviously if you are not so confident, you can then baste it all the way around so that it's put together securely for you and you haven't got to worry about your pins. So I'm just going to pin all that together, making sure that the edges are exactly aligned. So they're all nicely pinned together now. You can see the pins going all the way around. Everything matches up, and I'm going to take it to the sewing machine and sew that together with my 5/8 of an allowance, seam allowance. So that's sewed together really nicely. Now all I've got to do is trim the seam back and then finish it with the zigzag stitch and give it a good press. And I'll do that, and then we'll move on to the next stage. Okay, so they are actually starting to look like shorts now. So they're coming on really well, so I'm really pleased. So the next thing I need to do is stitch together the right seam allowance, and at this point it tells you to leave the left seam allowance open, and I'm presuming that's going to be so that you can insert your zip, so we shall see. So I'm going to now open them up right sides together again and pin down the side seams of the left hand side. Of the right hand side, sorry, it's telling you to leave the left hand seam open. So I'm doing the right hand side seam, going to pin that together, and once again, if you feel confident not to put the pins in, then don't put the pins in, just go ahead and sew straight away. But I don't feel really confident in doing that. I like to actually put the pins in to get the seams together. So I've got the pins in all the way down the left seam allowance. No, the right seam allowance, sorry, the right seam allowance. Get my seams right. And now I'm going to go ahead and stitch with the 5/8 of a seam allowance all the way down. So there we are, I've sewn down the seam, and I'm now going to finish the seam with the zigzag stitch and then go and give the seam a nice press. So now onto the waistband. So the next part is to actually sew together the two waistband pieces which have the interfacing on, making sure that you get the section E, which is the front section, on the matched up with section F at the actual right side. So the bit that's got a bit of an a kind of a bit of an edge there, and then it goes like that. So it's it kind of shaves off a bit there. They're the two pieces that you actually need to sew together so that you've got the interfaced waistband the right way round. So I'm going to do that. Again, it's with a 5/8 seam allowance. Okay, so that's sewn together, and now I've got the waistband pieces joined together, ready to put onto the actual shorts themselves. So I need to finish the seams, again putting the zigzag edge down the side, and then do the same for the facing waistband part as well. So for the next stage, you've got to pin your facing onto your shorts, which I've already done, and it can be a bit tricky because you've got to make sure that you line up the front facing with the front of the shorts. Oh, it's got caught to me here. So it can make sure that you've got that correct, that you've got your front facing with the front of the shorts, and if you line it up with all the notches, you should be okay, because the double notches meet the double notches and the single notches meet the single notches. And once you've pinned the facing on, you then have to obviously sew all along with your 5/8 of allowance seam allowance, which I am now going to do. So I've sewn on the waistband, there we go, I'm really happy with that. And as I say, just be careful that you do put the waistband the right way round. The other thing you've got to be careful about is that when you're going over the pocket area, that the pocket seams are facing in the right direction, otherwise you're going to end up unpicking and having to rejig the pocket seams so that they're facing the correct way. So yeah, make sure the pocket seams are facing in the right direction before you stitch over them. So I'm really pleased with that, and I'm going to go over to the ironing board now and give it a press. So I'm really pleased with how the shorts are coming out so far. The steps have been relatively simple to follow. The waistband was a little bit tricky. The next part is to actually put in the invisible zip, and I've started pinning it in. If you haven't done an invisible zip before, I would check out some of the videos on YouTube, as there's some really good ones on how to put in an invisible zip. I'm hoping at some point to do an invisible zip tutorial myself, as I really like invisible zips. So I'm actually putting in a blue invisible zip, not that it makes much difference because it's invisible, so you're probably not going to really see it anyway. Yeah, so I'm going to go and pop that in, and then I'm going to close up the rest of the side seam, and hopefully we are practically there then, just having then to put on the facing for the waistband. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and I'll come back to you as soon as that's all completed. So the invisible zip is in, and I'm really pleased with how that went in. Nicely opens up, there you go, and zips back up. Okay, so I'm really pleased with that, and the next stage is to put on the facing to cover up the raw edges on. So here's my facing, and that is then going to be put onto the waistband of the shorts to hide the raw edges. And the first thing I need to do is turn up the bottom edge of the waistband facing 5/8 of an inch, because I'm just going to turn that up and press it, because once it goes on, you're going to then use that fold there to hide those that edging. That's going to get hidden within the waistband. So I'm going to go and press that up 5/8 of an inch. Okay, so the waistband's on. There, you can see I've sewn it on. What I'm going to do now is trim the into the seams and clip it so that it sits nicely around the curves, and then I'm going to zigzag the edge to finish the edge. Once I've done that, I'm going to turn the waistband back over like that, and then it will give a nice finish to the waistband at the top there, and then it just needs to be sewn on the inside so that you can't see where the raw edges are. So I'm going to do all of that, and then I will show you the finished waistband. So the waistband's on, it's finished. There's the zip down the side. I'm really chuffed to bits with these shorts. I'm so pleased I found the pattern. The inside of the waistband looks like that. You have to turn it under and then stitch it in the crease where you actually put the waistband on. It's called stitching in the ditch, where you stitch in the crease, and then what it does, it catches the waistband on the inside so that it keeps your seams neat underneath, so you can't see any of the raw edges. So I'm so pleased, they are really good. Now all that's left to do is hem them, and I've tried them on and they fit really, really nicely, and the hem allowance for me is going to be about 1 centimetre. So what I want to do is I'm just going to zigzag around the edge to neaten off the seams, and then I'm just going to press them up 1 centimetre and stitch the hem around just 1 centimetre. So when I've done that, I'll show you, and then they'll be done, finished. So I've zigzagged around the edge, all the way around the edge, and now I'm going to hem them. So I've hemmed them, they are hemmed and they are complete, and I am really thrilled with them. I think they're great and I love the pattern, and I'm going to go and try them on, and I will pop some pictures up to show you what they look like on. So I'm really, really happy with them. So yeah, love them, love them. And you'd like to see some more like this, then please put a thumbs up and a like, and I'd love you to subscribe to my channel. So I'll see you again soon with another video. Bye for now. Bye.